Hi, this is Kevin O'Reilly, and welcome to Critical Thinking in History. And this episode is about the Sacco and Vanzetti case, which is a fantastic case. It's one of the most well-known cases in American history, and it's really interesting because it's controversial. The case was argued back and forth. There were protests all over the world about the case. What we're going to focus on is the evidence in the case. And there's a lesson on this particular case on my website, www.criticalthinkinginhistory.com. It's in the World War I 1920s unit. You can find it there. What we're going to look at is some of the evidence. It's a quite complicated case, no doubt about it. And it's really interesting, and I think you'll find it interesting and maybe something you can use with your students. So, on April 15th, 1920, there was two guards that were murdered when they were carrying the payroll from one of the factories, the Morrill factory here on the map, to the other one. And the payroll came to about a little under $16,000. The guards walked down Railroad Ave and then took a left on Pearl Street, you can see here. And they were shot when they got in front of the Rice and Hutchins factory. These are all shoe factories. Note the excavation. So there was laborers working on this excavation for a restaurant here. After they shot the guards, took the money, a getaway car over here came along, picked them up, and they made their escape. So that's what happened in the case. There were two witnesses across the street, very close. These are just the close witnesses. One had walked by and turned around when the shooting started, and three of them were right in the building, so just a few feet away from where the crime occurred. It happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so there were a lot of witnesses around, which made it kind of interesting. So you can see this here in a photograph. And so we're looking on the map from right to left. And here are the witnesses, the one who turned around, the two closest ones in the excavation, and three in the window. All these witnesses said that, except one, said that it was not Sacco and Vanzetti that they identified. The one said it was Sacco. One of the robbers was Sacco. And he then said later, well, I actually dove under a bench when the shooting started, which makes sense. Bullets were flying. And then he said, no, actually, I just said that because I was pressured by the defense attorney, and I actually saw the crime. You can see the railroad crossing here. So they drove the car here, the water tower on the map. So this is where the two guards were shot. So one of them ran across the road and was shot when he crossed. So that's the situation with that. The bullet evidence was ballistics turned out to be very important in the case. So there were 4 bullets presented in the case, and if I can, okay, can't do that. So let's do this, stop sharing, and then share again. So there were 4 bullets, and they were presented that bullet number 3, so they were marked Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, and bullet number 3 is that one, and it was argued that that bullet came from Sacco's gun. When Sacco and Vanzetti were arrested, they had guns on them, and the prosecution argued that Sacco had a gun that matched bullet 3. But you'll note that all of the other bullets, the markings on them slant slightly to the right, which means that the gun they were shot from rotated the bullet to the right, except bullet 3, which rotated to the left, which means bullet 3 was not fired from the same gun as the other ones. The witnesses said these all came out of one of the guards, Baradelli. The witnesses said that they were shot, all the bullets were fired by one of the assailants with one gun. Nobody said there were 2 guns. So the question is, where'd this other bullet come from? If the witnesses didn't see another gun, where'd it come from? And one of the suggestions is that it came from the prosecution that fired a test bullet through it and then replaced that bullet in the evidence that was supplied at the trial. Keep in mind that Sacco and his lawyer agreed to have bullets test fired from his gun. If he knew the gun committed the crime, why on earth would he agree to have test bullets fired from the gun? So that makes some evidence on the defense side. In addition to the bullets, there were shell casings. When a bullet is fired, the shell casing comes out, and they're often found at the scene of the crime. And according to a police report at the time, 3 shell casings were found, but 4 shell casings were presented at the trial. Now, it might be that after the police report, then they found a 4th shell casing, but only one of the 4 casings actually pointed to Sacco's gun. So the defense argued, wait, the prosecution added another shell casing that they again fired from Sacco's gun. So that's the ballistics evidence. There was also, the prosecution argued that Sacco took the gun from one of the guards. So when he was arrested, he had a certain type of gun on him, and they argued it was Baradelli, the guard's gun. And they knew that it wasn't. As far as anybody can tell, the serial numbers did not match the 2 guns. It was the same kind of gun, but it wasn't Baradelli's gun as far as anybody can tell. So that's pretty interesting. The prosecution argued that the 2 defense suspects were consciousness of guilt. They had consciousness of guilt. So when they were arrested, they lied. They lied all over the place. They lied about having the guns and how they got them and what they were using them for, and they lied, and the police showed this in the trial, and so that was a factor. The defense argued, yeah, they lied, but they lied because they were anarchists, and they thought that the prosecution was going to be that they were going to get prosecuted for being anarchists, not that they were prosecuted for the crime. So the other area is alibis, and Sacco had an alibi that he was in Boston on the day of the crime. He wasn't in work. If he was in work, he would have had a record of it, and the trial would have focused on somebody else. But he wasn't at work that day. He was a shoe person, so he was in another factory in another town. He said he went to Boston for his passport, and the person at the Italian consulate verified it. He said, yeah, he came in, he had a photograph. The photograph was too large. It had 3 people in it, his wife and his son. And the consulate guy went to somebody else to talk to him about it because they wanted to grant him the passport, but they couldn't. And he remembered looking at the calendar, a large calendar on the wall, and it was April 15th. So that's how he said he remembered the day. But remember, he was an Italian. And he submitted his testimony in writing because he was in Italy in 1921 at the time of the trial. So the prosecution didn't get a chance to cross-examine him. 8 other people also testified, all Italians, that Sacco was in Boston. One guy said he was at a restaurant with him and things like that. 16 people said that Vanzetti was with them in Plymouth on the April 15th. Vanzetti was a fish seller, so he didn't punch in and out of a factory, and he had no other proof that he was not at the scene of the crime. But nobody identified Vanzetti at the scene of the crime except in the getaway car. A few people identified him there. He had a very large mustache, and he would have been pretty easy to identify compared to Sacco, who actually looked like a gang leader. And several of the witnesses said, well, actually, later, maybe it was that other guy. So there were a couple other things. After the trial, there were 6 appeals, and they were all rejected by the judge. And one of those was because another person confessed the crime. Celestino Medeiros confessed, and he was on trial for another murder. And interestingly, he ended up being executed the same day as Sacco and Vanzetti. But he said things about he said, I was part of a gang that committed this crime, and Sacco and Vanzetti were not. And he was part of a gang. When they looked at the evidence he gave, some of it was like, oh, that's true. Yeah, he had some details. For example, that they used 2 getaway cars. So they ran a getaway car to a certain lonely spot where they'd hidden the other car, switched cars, so it had different license plate, was a different kind of car, and got away. And Medeiros got $2,800 on him a couple days after the crime was committed. And there were 5 robbers, and it was a little over $15,000, almost $16,000. So his cut would have been around $3,000. So that's sort of unusual. And the leader of the gang that Medeiros implicated said, yeah, we were going to commit that crime. We went over the crime scene. I walked it and thought of how we would do the crime. And then Sacco and Vanzetti replaced us and did it a week early. And so they did the crime. We didn't do the crime. Police said this was done by professionals. They had a getaway car. When they drove away, they dropped tacks in the road so that nobody could follow them. They had another car, different license plates. It was a professional job, and that Sacco and Vanzetti were a shoemaker and a fish peddler, and maybe not professional crooks. So that's some of the evidence in the case. I find it fascinating. I'm so glad I was able to research it and learn about it. And I think you'd find it fascinating too. You might want to check it out again, www.criticalthinkingandhistory, all one word, .com. And when you get on there, you go to the U.S. history and 1920s, World War I, 1920s unit. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.